I need to say something today that I have never said quite this directly on this channel before, and I am saying it because I think a lot of you need to hear it not as a teaching, not as a framework, but as an honest conversation from someone who has been exactly where you might be right now. There was a period in my life where I was doing everything right, everything. I was meditating every morning. I was doing the visualizations, holding the elevated emotional states, working on my beliefs, addressing my patterns, applying every tool and teaching I had spent years studying and genuinely believed in. I was consistent. I was committed. I was showing up for my practice with real sincerity, not going through the motions. And nothing was moving. Not in the dramatic, obvious way that would have at least given me something clear to react to. It was subtler than that, and in some ways harder. Things were just still. Like I was pushing against something invisible, something that absorbed every effort without giving anything back. And after long enough of that, something started to crack. I started to doubt, not just the practice, not just the techniques, but the deeper truth underneath all of it. The truth that I had built so much of my understanding of life around. That we are not separate from the source of all creation. That the same intelligence that holds the universe in order lives within us. That we genuinely have the capacity to co-create our reality. And here is what made it even harder. Because I had spent years studying consciousness and manifestation and the laws that govern reality, I knew enough to feel guilty about doubting. I knew that doubt was a low frequency. I knew that my thoughts and feelings were creating my reality. So now I was not just exhausted from the situation itself, I was exhausted from trying not to feel exhausted. Afraid that my fear was attracting more of what I feared. Carrying the weight of everything that was not working, plus the weight of believing I should not be feeling the weight. If any of that sounds familiar, if you have ever found yourself in that particular kind of spiral, where the very knowledge that is supposed to set you free starts to feel like one more thing you are failing at, I want you to know something clearly before we go any further. You are not failing, you have not gotten it wrong, and you are absolutely not alone. What I eventually discovered, through that exhaustion, through that crack in my certainty, through the period that felt like everything I had built my understanding on was being questioned, was something that changed the way I practice everything I believe in, not by abandoning any of it, but by understanding something I had been missing at the center of all of it. The problem was never what I was doing. It was the internal state from which I was doing it. And underneath that, a misunderstanding about the relationship between our own conscious effort and the deeper intelligence that moves through us and through everything. By the end of this conversation, I am going to share the specific shift that brought me back, not to blind optimism, not to pretending everything was fine, but to a real, grounded, deeply felt faith that has never left me since. And a practical understanding of how manifestation actually works at its deepest level that I wish someone had explained to me years earlier. If you are tired right now, if you are close to giving up on something you have wanted for a long time and worked for with genuine sincerity, please stay with me, because this conversation is specifically for you. If you are new here, hit subscribe and grab the free PDF on equal hours and their meanings linked in the description. Let's go deeper. So let me explain what I mean when I say the problem was never what I was doing, because I think this is the piece that most people in the manifestation space never quite get clear enough to be genuinely useful. When I was going through that period I described, doing all the right things and feeling like nothing was moving, I was on the surface, executing my practice correctly. The meditation was happening. The visualization was happening. The journaling, the affirmations, the deliberate emotional work. All of it, consistently, every single day. But here is what was also happening underneath all of that disciplined external practice. Every morning after my meditation, I would spend the rest of the day completely immersed in the problem I was trying to solve. Scanning for evidence that something was shifting. Analyzing what I might be doing wrong. Running mental scenarios about how things might unfold. Quietly, persistently, almost obsessively focused on the gap between where I was and where I wanted to be. And here is what I did not fully understand at the time, even though I thought I did. Every moment I spent focused on that gap, every hour of mental energy poured into the problem, into what was not yet resolved, into the distance between my current reality and the one I was trying to create. I was projecting exactly that outward. Not my morning visualization. Not my carefully cultivated elevated state from the meditation session. The dominant signal I was broadcasting across the vast majority of my waking hours was the frequency of the problem itself. This is the piece that Neville Goddard pointed to with such precision, and that took me far too long to genuinely absorb. Your reality does not respond to what you do for 20 minutes each morning. It responds to your dominant state across the entire day. And if you spend 20 minutes in elevated alignment and then 6 hours mentally rehearsing the problem, the fear, the doubt, the distance, you know which one wins. But I want to go even deeper than that, because I think there is something underneath the doing that is even more fundamental, and it connects directly to what I now understand about the nature of who we actually are. We are not separate from the source of creation. This is not a metaphor. This is not a comforting spiritual idea designed to make us feel better. This is, as best as I understand it, a literal truth about the nature of consciousness and reality. The same intelligence that organizes galaxies, that grows a human being from a single cell, that turns a seed into a tree without any instruction from our rational mind, that intelligence is not separate from us. It expresses itself through us. It is the deepest part of what we are. I think of it as a divine spark, that innermost part of us that existed before the conditioning, before the fear, before all the learned beliefs about what is possible and what is not. That spark is not trying to get somewhere. It is not in lack. It is not anxious about outcomes or timelines or whether things are going to work out. It simply is fully, completely, without doubt or contraction, the creative intelligence of the universe expressed in individual form. And when we act from that place, when our intentions and our actions arise from genuine alignment with that deeper intelligence, rather than from the fear that things might not work out, we are not really manifesting in the way most people think about it. We are not pulling something toward us from a distance. We are expressing outward what is already true at the level of our deepest nature. This is why the doing, on its own, was never going to be enough. Because I was doing from the wrong place entirely. I was doing from the anxious, contracted, desperate to fix it place. From the place that was focused on the problem rather than on the truth of what I am and what is therefore already available to me. And that place, however hard it works, however disciplined it is, cannot produce the result that acting from the divine spark produces, because it is broadcasting a fundamentally different signal. Here is what I mean practically. Think about two people making the same financial decision. Same information, same opportunity, same external circumstances. One is making the decision from genuine internal alignment, from a quiet, settled, deeply felt sense that this is right, that they are worthy of this, that the universe is fundamentally working in their favor, even when it does not look that way on the surface. The other is making the same decision from fear, from the anxious hope that this particular move will finally fix what feels broken, from a place of needing this to work, because the alternative is too frightening to sit with. The actions look identical from the outside. The internal states generating those actions could not be more different. And over time, those different internal states produce genuinely different financial realities, not because the universe rewards one person and punishes the other, but because the quality of consciousness you bring to your creating shapes everything about what gets created. I spent a long time in that second category while believing I was in the first, and the exhaustion that came from that, from trying so hard from such a contracted, fearful, problem-focused internal state, was the real source of what I thought was the practice failing. The practice was not failing. I was doing the practice while simultaneously undermining it at a deeper level than the practice could reach. So what actually changes this? How do you shift from acting from the anxious, contracted place to acting from the divine spark? Especially when your external circumstances are genuinely difficult and the evidence around you seems to confirm the fear rather than the faith. That is exactly where we are going next. And I think what I am about to share is going to reframe something that a lot of people in the manifestation space have been approaching from the wrong direction entirely. So here is where I want to introduce something that took me a long time to genuinely understand, not just intellectually, but in a way that actually changed how I live and how I practice everything I believe in. There is a distinction that I think is one of the most practically important in the entire manifestation space, and almost nobody talks about it clearly enough. The distinction between conscious intention and divine surrender. Between the moments when your role is to act, to move, to plant seeds with deliberate intention, and the moments when your role is to step back, to trust, to release the how and the when into the hands of something that knows far more than your rational mind ever will. Most people treat these as opposites. Either I am taking responsibility for my reality and acting consciously, or I am surrendering and leaving it to God, to the universe, to whatever higher intelligence I believe in. But that framing is exactly what creates the exhaustion I described in the opening of this video, because it sets up a false choice between two things that are not actually in opposition at all. They are partners. And knowing when to lean into one versus the other is one of the most important skills in any genuine manifestation practice. Let me explain what I mean by that in practical terms, because I think this is where it becomes immediately useful rather than staying in the realm of beautiful spiritual theory. When something genuinely lights you up, when a desire or an idea or an opportunity arrives with a quality of enthusiasm, of natural excitement, of feeling pulled rather than pushed, that is the signal to act. That quality of inspired, energized, genuinely joyful movement towards something is the divine spark speaking through your emotional body. It is the deeper intelligence within you pointing in a direction and saying, yes, this way, move. And in those moments, acting with full commitment, with everything you have, is not controlling or forcing. It is cooperating. It is saying yes to the intelligence that is already moving through you. But when you find yourself anxious about a desire, when thinking about it produces more tension than joy, when you are obsessing over it, scanning for evidence that it is coming, trying to force the how, feeling desperate about the when, that is a completely different signal. That is not the divine spark. That is the fearful, contracted, rational mind trying to take over a process it was never designed to manage alone. And in those moments, the act of letting go, of genuinely releasing the outcome into the hands of something larger than your own rational control, is not passivity or defeat. It is one of the most powerful and courageous things you can do. I think about this in terms of a garden. Your role is to prepare the soil, to plant the seeds with care, to water them with intention and attention. That is your part, the conscious, deliberate, fully committed part. But once the seed is in the ground, you do not dig it up every hour to check whether it has sprouted yet. You do not try to manually open the seed casing with your fingers. You do not reorganize the soil every day because you are afraid the growth is not happening fast enough. You trust that inside that seed is an intelligence that knows exactly how to become what it was designed to become, and that your anxious interference will only disrupt that process, not accelerate it. The divine spark within you works the same way. You bring the intention. You align the energy. You take the inspired action. And then you trust, genuinely, deeply, not as a performance of faith, but as a real act of letting go, that the intelligence moving through you and through all of life knows the right timing, the right path, and often a far better version of the outcome than your rational mind could have designed. I want to share something I personally practice in the moments when I genuinely do not know what to do, when I have planted every seed I know how to plant and the situation still feels unresolved and I can feel the anxiety starting to take over. I stop trying to figure it out. I genuinely stop. And I say, simply and honestly, something like, I have done what I know how to do. I release the rest. I trust that the intelligence within me and within this situation knows what I cannot see, and I am willing to be surprised by how this resolves. That is not a magical formula. It is an act of genuine internal release, and the relief that follows it every single time tells me something important. The relief is the signal that I have returned to alignment, that I have stepped out of the contracted, controlling, anxious place and back into the open, trusting, surrendered place where the real creative intelligence can actually move. And here is something I have been exploring more deeply in my own practice recently that I want to share with you, because I think it is one of the most powerful tools for accessing that surrendered, connected state, especially when the mind is loud and the anxiety is high. Breath work. I know that word gets used in many different contexts, and I do not want to reduce it to a trend or a technique. What I am talking about is the deliberate, conscious use of breath to shift your nervous system out of the contracted, fight or flight state and back into a genuinely open, connected, receptive state, where you can actually feel the divine spark within you rather than just thinking about it intellectually. When I am in a period of genuine struggle, when the rational mind is spinning and the fear is loud and the gap between where I am and where I want to be feels unbearable, breath work has been one of the most reliable ways I have found to actually come back to myself. Not to think my way back. To breathe my way back. To use the body itself as the doorway back to the deeper intelligence that is always present, always available, always untouched by whatever is happening on the surface of my circumstances. I am genuinely thinking about bringing a full video to this channel on breathwork, the specific practices I use, how they work, and how you can begin using them in your own life to access that connected, surrendered state more easily and more consistently. If that is something you would want, let me know in the comments. Just write breathwork, and I will know that conversation is worth having together. Now, back to the distinction between acting and surrendering. Because there is one more piece of this I want to make sure lands clearly before we move into the final part of our conversation. The universe is not chaotic. I want to say that clearly because I think one of the things that makes surrender so difficult for so many people is the fear that if they let go of control, everything will fall apart. That the situation will get worse. That nothing will happen. That letting go means losing. But look at the natural world for a moment. Everything in nature operates according to a deep, intelligent, extraordinarily precise order. The seasons follow their cycle without any intervention from our rational mind. A human being develops from a single cell into an extraordinary complexity of systems and organs and intelligence without anyone consciously directing the process. Plants grow, bloom, seed, die, and regenerate according to a wisdom that has been operating flawlessly for longer than human consciousness has existed. That same ordered intelligence is not absent from your life. It is operating in your life, through your life, as your life, with the same precision and the same care. And when you release your desperate grip on the how and the when, you are not abandoning the process. You are finally getting out of the way enough to let that intelligence do what it does naturally, which is move things toward their most aligned, most beautiful, most perfectly timed expression. So here we are, and I want to begin this final part of our conversation by speaking directly to you, not as a teacher presenting a framework, not as someone who has figured everything out and is passing down wisdom from a place of having all the answers, but as someone who has been genuinely lost in the middle of this journey, who has felt exactly what you might be feeling right now, and who found her way back. If you are tired, if you have been doing this work with real sincerity for a real amount of time, and you are starting to wonder whether any of it is actually true, whether you are actually capable of creating something different, whether the life you have been working toward is genuinely available to you, or whether you have been chasing something that was never really meant for you, I need you to hear this clearly. Do not give up. Not because I am offering you empty encouragement. Not because I think positive thinking alone will fix whatever is happening in your life right now, but because of something I understand now that I did not understand during the hardest period of my own journey, something that changes everything about how we interpret the moments when nothing seems to be working. Your external reality is not a verdict. It is a reflection. And more specifically, it is a lagging reflection, a delayed echo of an internal state that existed before this moment, not a fixed announcement of what is permanently true about what is possible for you going forward. This distinction sounds simple. It is actually one of the most radical and most liberating ideas I have ever encountered. Because it means that everything you are looking at right now, every circumstance that is not yet what you want it to be, every number that does not yet reflect the financial reality you are building toward, every situation that seems to contradict the version of your life you know is possible, none of it is telling you the truth about what is available to you. It is telling you the truth about what was true internally at some point in the past. It is old information. It is last season's harvest, not this season's planting. And if you change what you are planting right now, if you genuinely shift your internal identity, your internal state, your relationship with who you are and what you believe is available to you, the external will follow. Not instantly. Not without the bridge of circumstances and decisions and developments that always connects an internal shift to its external expression, but inevitably, because this is not wishful thinking. This is the most consistent pattern I have observed across my own life and the lives of every person I have ever worked with who has made a genuine, lasting financial transformation. The external always eventually catches up to the internal. Always. So the question is not whether the external can change. The question is whether you are willing to change the internal first, without waiting for the external to give you permission. And I want to be precise about what changing the internal actually means in practice. Because I think this is where so many people get stuck, especially when their external circumstances are genuinely difficult. They understand the concept. They believe it, intellectually. But when they look around at what is actually happening in their life right now, the gap between the internal state they are trying to cultivate and the external reality they are living in feels so wide that sustaining the new internal identity starts to feel like lying to themselves. I understand that feeling completely. I lived it. And here is what I eventually understood about it. Sustaining a new internal identity while your external circumstances have not yet caught up is not lying to yourself. It is not denial. It is not spiritual bypassing or pretending things are fine when they are not. It is something far more specific and far more powerful than any of those things. It is choosing, deliberately and repeatedly, to identify with what you are becoming rather than with what your past has created around you. Your external circumstances right now are the physical expression of an old version of you, of old thoughts, old feelings, old beliefs, old patterns of identity that existed before this moment of awareness. They are real. They are present. They deserve to be acknowledged honestly and dealt with practically. But they are not who you are now, and they are absolutely not who you are becoming. The divine spark within you, that deepest, most essential part of your nature that is genuinely connected to the source of all creation, that spark does not see lack. It does not see limitation. It does not look at your current bank balance or your current circumstances and conclude that this is the limit of what is possible for you. It knows, with a completeness that your rational mind cannot access, the full scope of what you are capable of creating and becoming. And when you align your conscious identity with that spark, when you choose, even in the middle of difficult circumstances, to see yourself through the eyes of your highest nature rather than through the eyes of your current external situation, you shift the signal you are projecting outward. Not gradually, not eventually, but immediately. The shift in signal happens the moment the internal shift happens. The external catches up afterward on its own timeline, but the causal change, the change that actually drives everything else, happens inside, first. This is why I say do not give up. Not because the external is about to magically change tomorrow, but because you may be closer to the internal shift than you realize. And that internal shift, that genuine, felt, identity level recognition of who you actually are at the level of your deepest nature, is the only thing that needs to change for everything else to begin moving differently. I want to leave you with a simple practice that I return to whenever I feel the exhaustion creeping back in, whenever the gap between where I am and where I am going starts to feel wide again. I stop. I breathe slowly and deliberately, letting my nervous system settle out of the contracted, anxious place and back into something quieter. And then I ask myself one question, not with my rational mind, but from the deepest place I can access in that moment. If I genuinely trusted that everything I need is already within me, if I genuinely believed that the intelligence moving through my life knows exactly what it is doing and exactly when things need to happen, what would I feel right now? And I stay with whatever arises from that question, not performing the answer, genuinely asking and genuinely listening. Almost every time, what arises is something quieter and more settled than what I was feeling before. A recognition, underneath all the noise and the fear and the exhaustion, that something deeper than my rational mind is actually in charge of this process. And that my role, as important and as real as it is to align with that deeper intelligence, to act from it when action is called for, to rest in it when surrender is called for, and to trust it completely when I genuinely cannot see the path forward from where I am standing. That trust is not naivety. It is not passive resignation. It is the most active, most courageous, most genuinely creative thing I know how to do. Because it requires choosing, again and again, to identify with the truth of what I am at my deepest level, rather than with the temporary, lagging, already changing story that my external circumstances are currently telling. You are not behind. You are not broken. You are not someone who cannot do this. You are someone who has been planting seeds in good faith, sometimes from a contracted and fearful place without realizing it, sometimes from a genuinely aligned place without knowing how to sustain it. And now you have something you did not have before, a clearer understanding of the difference, and a more honest relationship with the practice that creates real change. Keep going. Not from desperation. From the quiet, settled, completely unshakable knowing that the divine spark within you is already the fullness of everything you are working toward, and that your only real job is to let that truth become more real to you, day by day, than the story your current circumstances are trying to tell. Thank you so much for staying with me until the end of this video. This one came from a genuinely personal place, and sharing it with you means more than I can easily say. If this resonated, if something here touched something real in you, please subscribe to the channel and share this video with someone who needs it. You never know whose life you might change with a single conversation. The books that have shaped my journey and that I personally recommend are all linked in the description below. And there is a free PDF in the description on equal hours and their meanings. Grab yours. It is completely free. And remember, if you want me to bring a full video on breathwork to this channel, just write breathwork in the comments below. I read everything. Thank you for being here. I will see you in the next one.